I think there's two takeaways when I go to talk about. I'm going to show you more than talk, actually. I love China. I'm an accountant, and I grew up on a farm, so what's the relevance of all of that? I grew up on a farm, which means I care more about making things and seeing things than talking about them. I'm not a journalist. I write academic papers, but hardly anyone reads them. And I spend all my free time coming across factories in China, and now do factory audits for the purpose of getting more detail about the factory. I get paid for the audits, but not as a business, because I want to get to the heart of finding the diamond in the rough, because there's thousands of suppliers that you wouldn't even want to touch, and there's just 1 in 1,000 that's perfect and you want to work with. How do you find that? And that's partly my curiosity. So 2 things: backstory. There's always a backstory behind every factory. You've got to find that. And number 2, what are the best practices of some startups that I've interviewed through Ben organising it at the Global Sources show. So what happens when you go into a factory? Let me go back here. Okay, so what have we got? What are we making with these 2 factories here? Oh, come on.
Hoverboards.
Oh, of course, hoverboards. We all love them. And you know that the US banned the hoverboards at the start of last year. You know that? And you couldn't ship anything into the US that looked like a hoverboard. And it wasn't until the UL standard came out middle of last year that manufacturers could go for certification. So one of these factories became the first UL certified maker. So which one was that? It's very easy, it's a dichotomous decision. Which one, the top one or the bottom one? Which one do you think got the UL certification to ship into the US?
Top one.
Top one, okay, you got it. Looks different, right? Okay, so the big message I have for a lot of people who haven't gone to China, just go into the factory and see for yourself. You don't need expertise to see the difference. The operators here are probably 100 times smarter than these operators, because this is your Adam Smith factory where you have 100 people and they all do 1/100th of the task. This person does 100 things, much smarter, but quality control. So I go into this factory, and this was after the US had banned hoverboards, and they said, oh, no problem, we've got 200 other countries we can ship to. They were doing 600 order into France when we visited this factory here. And so this top factory, this is Wellon, under the Wellon brand in the USA. They've got sales offices in the USA, and they're still doing very well because of that. So this is what I like to see. Here's another example of an audit I did. This is over 12 months ago, so I don't want to give you recent audits that I did. So a client wanted to order picture frames. So what happens when you order picture frames? Well, we go to 2 factories. So let's click on here. And so we have to visit the factory, right? So which factory would you buy from? And so just to speed up what we're going on here is quite obvious that these are 2 factories that are represented as top star suppliers in Global Sources anyway. So you think, okay, we can buy for any one. But the other thing too, and Ben originally talked about negotiating with suppliers. A lot of negotiation is about how can you help the supplier reduce their costs. The first thing you go in here and say, oh, Mr. Supplier, you need to cut half of these people that are in sales. Okay? That negotiation starts about helping the supplier manage their costs rather than you just push the price down on them. So we've got 2 factories here, and we ended up recommending the client to buy from one of these factories. So which one would you buy from? You want more information, don't you? But your first impressions count, right? So hand up for the blue? Hands up for the red?
Oh wait, blue, I was blue.
It doesn't matter. Look, both can do the job, okay? Both can do the job. So you like, some people like the red, some of the blue. Actually, when I saw this, I went in here and I saw, because I've done a lot of work with HTC in Taiwan, and I found, wow, this is exactly like HTC in Taiwan. This is one of the top, what would you call it, generic smartphone manufacturers in Shenzhen, Joyhan Limited. And we're sourcing a photo frame from them. Wow. So anyway, in the end, okay, so let's go to negotiation now. And so the first order, $23 US. The other one, of course, the cheaper one would offer a MOQ 1,020 US. So what happens when you go with a really top line supplier that you don't want to have any problems? Okay, let's go with this one that's making smartphones. Well, second order, $26 US, third order, $28 US. Wow, suddenly you've got no margin as a buyer. And because you went with a powerful supplier. So the client came back, Neale, what do I do now? I've got no margin. If I order another 6,000 over the next 6 months, that's $30,000 US I have to pay more. What am I going to do? I said, okay, let's go back to the cheaper one, $20 US, and spend $1 US per unit to get a third-party inspector in the factory and actually inspect 50-60% of the goods in that factory, not just 5 or 10% as per some quality standard out there. So that was so I think a big thing that we learn when we go into factories is, yes, it's great to have that perfect factory, but the perfect factory also has a lot of power. And then they get you in at the start with a low order, low price, and then the next order, up a bit, next order, up a bit. Suddenly you don't have a sustainable supplier. So you don't see that until you go into the factory often. Okay, so we know that Pebble nearly went bankrupt in 2012 trying to make their watch. They raised another 20 million last year for a second round watch, so suddenly they're still in business. But what suppliers are doing now, they've got a stepdaughter in their factory. This is a little food tester that you go to the supermarket, you stick it in the food and it'll tell you how much poisons are in the food. Wouldn't you like to have that, right? And this one here, this is a medical device. And this is the first time I saw, this was less than 12 months ago, where suppliers have got their stepdaughters. What's a stepdaughter? It's a product that the owner thought, okay, let's just make this and we'll just put it in there to say that we're being innovative. But they're not pouring R&D into that product and to become the sole maker of further versions of the product over time. They put a little bit of money in it, they make it, let's just see what happens. So a lot of the suppliers you find in China, they don't have that innovative mindset where they want to focus on consistency and just making a little bit, tweaking it every year. They're looking around, oh, I like that product, let's copy that. I like that product, let's copy that. So the envy takes over the actual consistency over time. Right, what else have we learned when we're going in? I asked 260 suppliers, what's your biggest challenge? Cost control, competition, market development. Wow, if cost control is their biggest challenge and you're going to negotiate with them, what are you going to talk about? If you want to help them, maybe the conversation starts with, how can I help you manage your costs better? Before you even talk about the top line, the price you're going to offer them, right? Then you get their interest, right? Because that's their challenge. Okay, so I like to find out what is the mind of the supplier, and that's their responses. I have copies of this distributed to you, so don't worry about that. We get copies for you. All right. Another big thing that suppliers have huge challenges. Here are the Hoover boards. Okay. This is a receiving inspection of the UL certified factory. Here's the other factory that's making for the French customer. They've got these battery packs. There's 2,200 milliamp hour cells that go into a 20 pack, 4.4 amp hour battery pack that goes in the Hoover board. And it's got Samsung written on the outside. I don't know if the cells are from Samsung. They don't know, but it looks good and it goes in the Hoover board. Here, they're testing every cell that comes in. Receiving inspection is a big thing that's overlooked by a lot of owners of suppliers because they think, oh, this is not making a product. Like, I have to put money into receiving inspection. Yes, you do, because a lot of problems occur because they get duds coming in on the outside. And our friend you might talk about more about this later if you want to refer to that. All right, so there's our two Hooverboard factories again. Receiving inspection is a big thing. Or when you go into a factory, one of these no longer exists. So which one is it? There's two factories here. Which one no longer exists?
It's always a tricky question, Neil.
I'm trying to wake you up. We should bring the pizza in because pizza goes good with video.
No. That's just a huge insight. Let's be the bottom one.
No, top one.
The top one.
Top one.
See?
How do you know, right? And sometimes think, well, we've got all uniforms here. There's some giveaways. Look at these factories. Look, there's a static band that's not even attached to one of the operators. Okay. Nice uniforms, beautiful. Documentation. So what are you going to go for if you're sourcing? Looks or documentation?
Documentation.
Hands up for documentation. Hands up for looks. So which factory do you think doesn't exist today?
Top one.
The top one. Yeah, you're right.
What you got to remember as well, if you're doing an announced audit, then the top one is an announced audit. If it's not an announced audit, the top one might look like the bottom one.
Yeah. All right. Now, and the other thing too is that how come the bottom one gets it and the top one doesn't? Well, what I found when I visited the factory was that, they had another assembly operation where they were doing OEM set-top boxes for Sharp. Oh, guess what? If you're an OEM manufacturer for a Japanese brand, guess what does that tell you? Yeah, that the Japanese don't do anything without sending people over to monitor, manage, train. Like if you talk about management practice, the Japanese know how to manage factories. Okay, so if they're an OEM supplier for a Japanese brand, okay, we're done now. This is fine. All right. See, there's always telltale signs. Anyone can pick these up. All right. So OEM, and a big mistake that suppliers are making these days is that it's the envy. They're searching for the next best thing, but they forget that OEM is their pedigree. OEM is the DNA of their learning that makes them a good factory in the first place. The Japanese brand taught them the documentation. All right, not ISO 9000. Anyone get an ISO 9000? But the Japanese brand, they said, observers in, supervisors to make sure they get all that documentation right. Okay, so a few ideas. Here's a famous one you know about. Now, only the professor would be allowed to go into this factory. What are they making here? Come on, you should all know.
Joysticks. That's a skill.
Come on,
Xbox
what is that?
Gaming controller.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which one? Come on, there's only two. Which one is it?
PS4.
Xbox.
Xbox, you got it. All right. So this is a supplier from Microsoft.
Okay.
All right. This is the main supplier from Microsoft. All right. And so, amazing operation, but documentation through the whole assembly line. What do I mean by documentation? Here it is here. I slowed down the video just to show you that different parts of the assembly line, they're ticking off how many have passed, how many have failed, and there's the documentation. I just slowed it down just to show you briefly, okay? So there's all the passes and fails that part of the assembly line. So you're looking for documentation all the way through. You've got that quality gauge going all the way through. That's the Microsoft supplier. Okay, you want to see best practice, then boom, okay? So, and then it's not about automation, all right? Anyone can do automation, like there's the Microsoft one, there's the Joyhung one, but often automation is not the whole assembly line, it's just various parts of the assembly line. When HTC automated their assembly line in Taiwan, they replaced, I think it was about 5 people with 2 robots, but it was in the testing area, it wasn't in the assembly area. Like Foxconn went across to HTC to find out how to automate. It's not about automating everything. Automation is a strategic thing. Okay, so what I would recommend any of you, if you had time, you call Ione, tell them I sent you. Go and visit this factory because it is an amazing company. There's a Shenzhen listed company, and I visited them for a second time less than 2 months ago. They're making the ANC headphones now. I'd buy them, but their FOB price ranges from about $22 to about $38. You could go to another supplier and get ANC headphones, for half, 1/3 that price. But would you trust that quality over time, right? Ione is an amazing one, okay? So I went into that factory, enough of that. Okay, so what are we learning from some of these startups? What are they? I've just finished writing a report with KPMG, hasn't been published yet, but here are some of the findings. That's what some of the big brand names are doing, like H&M and GR Armani and all that. A lot of interestingly, if you ask what are the big brands doing with their suppliers in China, are they moving out of China? Yeah, you know, they're moving, you know, to try and near and far sourcing. That's a totally different strategy. But one thing they are doing is they're saying, oh, internet, no way. We've got to have our designers come into China and be face-to-face in that factory when we're designing, because of like the fashion world now is so fast now, and the internet is too slow for, and we do things over the internet, there's so much misunderstandings with communication. And so Armani, H&M, IKEA, they're just sending the designers across to Hong Kong and into China. They're in the factories for several weeks going through new ranges and everything like that. Interesting that you thought the internet. What about the unicorns in China? 46 of them, there's only 12 of them that are hardware. Okay, Xiaomi, DJI, Royale Corporation. There's only 12 that are hardware. What are all the others doing? Software, fintech. All right, it's a tell, isn't it, of where VC capital is going. Fintech and biotech at the moment. There's our. Okay, so Royale. What's so special about Royale? They're at the startup Launchpad, Ben. Are they coming in October?
Hopefully.
You've got to get them. No, the reason, $3 billion unicorn now. But the owner, this is a diamond in the rough. This owner is a diamond in the rough because he has invested another 1.8 billion in heavy automated factory in Shenzhen, and he predicts the global display industry is 150 billion, will be over 300 billion in the next 5-10 years. Well, at the moment, 2016, 150 billion. That's going to be double. It's going to double that next 5 years. He's talking about having displays that will go on cups. And this will be a corporate gift. I'll give you a corporate gift and there's a display on it. And it just syncs with Wi-Fi and things like that. The displays, they're made of flexible displays. You've got to get them back. All right? It's not just the VR goggle, all right? So you're gonna have a space in the Launchpad for unicorns. Do you know what I mean? Get some buzz going, all right? Sorry to hold you up from pizza. What do we learn from startups? So, okay. What I'm good at from my academic training is taking 100,000 words of content, bringing it down to 10,000 words, or just interviewing 1,000 suppliers and then telling you, okay, these are the 5 things you need to know. Okay, so we interview all of these, plus many, many more, and this is what I got, and you've got that handout in front of you, that list. Okay, all right, and so just an example, we can very quickly. This is a skin detector device. Very, very interesting. This lady's French, but the company is Taiwanese. Skin detector to work out the moisture in your skin, and they sell products associated with that. Of course, you need a French lady to help sell things like that. Very, very important. But very interesting. Taiwanese company, they wanted to expand. They're trying to get a China manufacturing partner. But the manufacturing partner may say, okay, on the following terms, we will partner with you. You need to bring everything from Taiwan into China. And they said, we're not going to do that. We don't trust you. Okay. They didn't say that. We just said, no, we're not going to do that. They ended up going to Thailand. Okay, and that's not the first startup I've heard that's gone to Thailand, worried about protection of IP and things like that. Like, you know, SK Ross, that major brand of power adapters. Come on, you're travelling, you know the power adapter. You open up your Cathay Pacific flight magazine, SK Ross is in there. All right? And yeah, anyway, so they moved from Guangzhou to Thailand for 3 reasons. Number one, they got 2 million hits on their website, and most of those hits were coming from Guangzhou. They realised, they're not our customers that are looking at our new products. Okay, and number 2 was the labour costs are going up. They went to Bangkok, and then the Bangkok government put the actual minimum wage up anyway after they moved there. And number 3, they were worried about IP protection in further ways. So they've actually moved to Thailand for that purpose. So it's, you know, I guess that's a latter stage of the startup when you get really, really serious and you've got a brand that you want to protect. Then you need to have that conversation about, okay, are we going to do Shenzhen? What's our next best country we should, focus on, So what else? Gochi Tech, how do they protect their product? Well, Matthew, he's been in this business for 30 odd years. He's got a factory in Dongguan for his family, and so basically he could use that as a secret black box to protect all the bags and his special product from the suppliers. Okay, so physical protection is very important, and so Grom. Grom? They make 3D printed orthopedic soles. So these are all startups that are at the global sources represented. How do they protect their IP? How do they protect their IP? Well, their product is very customized. Everyone has a different foot, so it's okay. So why 3D printing in China? Why can't you do that in USA? Because people don't realise that 3D printing is still labour intensive to clean the product after it's 3D printed. So that's why they outsource it to China. But they don't have to worry about IP so much because every product is customised. Okay? And iDummy, very interesting. They make this mannequin that can expand and contract in different ways based on your programming of your coordinates in the computer for male, female, whatever. They're selling these mannequins for about $12,000 each. How did they scale? How did they partner? They found a partner, Winsim, which is a major swimwear manufacturer in Shenzhen. So they're an equity partner that they joined with. This is out of Hong Kong Polytechnic University in Hong Kong. All right. So Ambi Climate, Ben, you mentioned them. I think this is the big three things. I'm going to show video, otherwise I'll just sound like Ben. Okay, Ben, I'll differentiate myself when you talk. Okay. So here, everyone knows Julian Lee, poster boy for Hong Kong successful startup, and here we have John Bunford. He was making the world's smallest 3D printer at one stage about 18 months ago. So first time they did their own design, prototyping units by hand in Hong Kong. So we don't want anyone to see this. So the second time they find a factory in China. But how did they find a factory in China? Julian, through the community, goes to John and says, can you recommend a factory that you have worked with? Well, John is he's got a degree in animatronics and very high-end engineering skills, and he knows a lot of factories in China, and so he gave that community knowledge, that sharing to find that factory. Okay, and then at that time they used soft tooling, so therefore if anything went wrong, the supplier could only use that tooling to make another 1,000 units, not another 100,000 units. And after they got that working and they got their product moving, then they decided, okay, now we're going to need to bring a management consultant in to find the real factory where we want to do hard tooling, where we can make hundreds of thousands of units. So Ambi Climate, how they protected their IP was actually staging. 3 different stages they went through. So I think these are strategies that I can bring to the table, and you can talk to me more about that over lunch. Finally, Rotarex, you heard of the drone racer Rotarex, and really interesting that they had a factory making the propellers, their own design, and then they had another factory they contracted with to actually propellers with the unit. And what happened was, because their IP was in the propellers and the motors, they kept that separate. But this propeller factory, they went and laser scanned the propeller, so therefore then they can actually copy it with the tooling and then actually make it and sell it to other drone manufacturers. And so what happened was that Rotarex, they went into the community and they told all the other drone manufacturers, don't buy from this propeller factory because they've copied our IP. And then this factory found out that they were being shamed on social media. They contacted Rotarex. What are you doing? What is it? Well, stop copying. So, okay, if we don't copy, will you stop shaming us? I said, okay, all right. So community shaming can work in specific pockets in that industry. So that's the second time I've mentioned the community as being an enabler. Tech Packer will skip over that, bring someone else can talk about that if they've got questions. I like to put the experience of these startups I interviewed in terms of the 3 areas of concern in working with suppliers. Number 1, can they make what you want them to make? the capability, and this is more their mindset and their experience. There's two dimensions of that. Here, due diligence, legal documentation, and the examples I gave you, a lot of it was not about how to do the contract, it was all about how to physically separate, how to actually physically protect. And because startups, you don't have all that team of lawyers to actually fight a case if something goes wrong. You've got to assume that you cannot take them to court. You go bankrupt trying to do that. Yeah, the big brands, Fortune 500, they got that big whip, but no startup has that whip. So you've got to work on a front-end approach to copying your IP. And there's some examples I showed you. And then finally, you've got that measurement verification of that process where you might get third parties in, or better still, you've got to be in there yourself. So let me just stop there. Thank you for giving me the time. Ben, thank you.